He never thought he'd be on this dream cruise, but a good luck in a game of cards won him a ticket on the Titanic. He believes that the front must be a paradise of dreams, but luck brought him not only dreams, but also the most beautiful love in his life. Jack met Ruth for the first time on the deck of the prestigious first-class cabin. That fresh and refined temperament is like a fairy coming down to earth, making Jack unable to extricate himself. She is the daughter of a superior person, and even the fiancée of the rich man Carl, who combines beauty and status. However, she is not happy. For the sake of the family, she must marry Carl, whom she does not like. The hypocrisy and treachery of the upper class have long made her sick, and even her mother's snobbery has made her intolerable. So she decided to die, and just at this moment she met Jack. Jack knew she didn't really want to die, she just lacked a reason to live. So while taking off his shoes, he said that she jumped and he jumped too, and he also said that he was also afraid because the fall hurts and the water is cold. Ruth was dissuaded by this crazy and sincere man. It turned out that there are such interesting people in the world. But when she tried to jump back, she missed her foot, and Jack grabbed her and refused to let go. She really felt the fear of death, and finally Jack rescued her. Fiancé Carl arrives and takes over Ruth. Jack and she are still not in the same world. But in order not to lose the demeanor of a rich man, Carl turned his head and invited Jack to have dinner together tomorrow night. Jack readily accepted. After returning, I gave the family heirloom, the Heart of the Ocean, to Ruth. The Heart of the Ocean is priceless from Louis XVI, but it doesn't excite Ruth's interest. On this day, Ruth found Jack to thank her. She found that although Jack was poor and wandering, he could live a peaceful life in all directions, and she was just a bird in a cage. The most important thing is that Jack is still a young painter, which aroused Ruth's strong interest, because she has always had a special liking for paintings. Jack talked about his homeless life, those exaggerated and unbelievable experiences. Ruth was very fascinated by it, and also taught her own unique skills. This scene happened to be met by Ruth's mother and the two ladies. The mother disliked Jack, wishing to get rid of him like a pest. But the accompanying Mrs. Brown was very friendly and thought he should have a decent outfit for the dinner, so she lent him his son's suit. Sure enough, people rely on clothes and horses on saddles, which perfectly matches this luxurious first-class cabin. Ruth's heartbeat quickened the first time she saw him. The two of them are absolutely beautiful together. However, this is not the paradise of their fate. This dinner will be full of swords and swords. Those hypocritical rich people don't care about how much credit he has made in saving people. They only use the superiority of the upper class to mock his inferior shabbiness. Jack used his humor and calmness to resolve the heavy smell of gunpowder one by one. He finally understood what a sad world Ruth lived in, so before leaving, he slipped a note to Ruth. He stood by the clock on the stairs, and Ruth arrived as promised.
So you want to go to a real party?
This is a down-to-earth place full of joy. No hypocrisy, no restraint. Ruth followed in the footsteps of Jack, enjoying the joy of the third-class cabin to the fullest, and even showed a different kind of ambition when her emotions were flying. But the reality is that she has to go back to the original cage, and Carl already knew about her going to Jack, so he raged at her and overturned the table. Her mother also accused her of not forgetting her family mission and ordered her not to see Jack again, so Ruth had to bow to fate again. On the other side, Jack was looking for her everywhere, but was blocked by layers of obstacles. Finally on deck, he pulls passing Ruth into a room and confides in her. But Ruth is gone anyway, Jack can't save her. At the dinner party, she saw a girl who was being taught etiquette by her mother, as if she saw a poor person like herself, who was being imprisoned by fate. So she plucked up the courage to find Jack again.
Hello, Jack.
The wind was cool and gentle that evening, and the rays of the sun connected the water and the sky. Jack told Rose to close her eyes and gently led her aboard the bow. This is the classic shot recorded in film history.
We're flying! Jack.
So far, Ruth is no longer bound by fate. She boldly invited Jack to the bedroom, put on the Heart of the Ocean, and asked Jack to make an artistic portrait of her, and this painting was passed down for many years. She left the painting in the Heart of the Ocean to Carl, determined to make a clean break with him, and Carl was angry from it. The two came to the classic car in the bottom cabin, and they fell in love for life. Ruth decides to wander the world with Jack as soon as the ship docks. Icebergs suddenly appeared ahead, but all remedies were of no avail. The ship passed by the iceberg, the hull was damaged in a large area, and a large amount of seawater was poured into 6 cabins. The hull designer said that the Titanic is powerless and will sink into the Atlantic Ocean in about an hour. Ruth and Jack witnessed the accident and decided to tell everyone about the danger. But Carl, who has been searching for them, framed it and put the blame on them. They said that Jack stole the heart of the ocean. Jack couldn't argue, and then they said that Jack's suit was also stolen from Mrs. Brown. Now Ruth was a little suspicious. They took Jack into the lower hold and handcuffed him. The lifeboat can only take half of the people at most. The captain ordered to save women and children first, and let all passengers wear life jackets. The entire Titanic was in chaos in an instant, and smoke bombs bloomed in the dark night sky for a long time. Joy in the eyes of children, but despair in the eyes of adults. What's ridiculous is that when life and death are at stake, my mother is still daydreaming about being a gentleman.
I hope they're not too crowded.
Ruth told her angrily that all the lifeboats can only save half of the people, which means that half of the people will die. But Carl said that the half who died should be inferior, and now Ruth has seen through his face completely.
You unimaginable bastard.
She decided to give up the escape and go to rescue her beloved Jack. Carl holds her back and she uses the spitting trick taught by Jack to get rid of Carl. Along the way, the seawater gradually rose. Ruth did not give up rescuing her lover, and finally she found Jack. But opening the handcuffs requires a tool. She ran through many rooms on the upper floor and found nothing. Under the flickering lights, she was full of despair. Finally she saw an axe, swung the fire hydrant and smashed the glass. But most of the bilge had been submerged by seawater, and she used almost all her courage to swim forward with an axe in hand. In order to avoid accidents, she gritted her teeth and closed her eyes, and cut off the handcuffs with an axe. They simply came to the upper floor, but it was sealed off. Jack led everyone to knock down the iron gate, and finally escaped to the deck, but only women and children are allowed in lifeboats. Jack let Ruth get on the lifeboat first, and Ruth was unwilling to abandon him anyway. At this time Carl came over and said he had a solution and would take Jack with him. The two men are surprisingly on the same page for the first time. Even though Jack knows Carl won't take kindly to him, he still promised Ruth that he would meet him, and Ruth was willing to get on the lifeboat. At a critical moment, maybe a second of parting will miss a lifetime. When the lifeboat descended to the next floor, Ruth jumped back to the cabin, and she wanted to live and die with her lover. After Jack saw it, he ran down quickly. This two-way rush, regardless of life and death, moistened the eyes of many viewers. Rose! Carl, who witnessed everything, had a killing intent, but fortunately they ran fast enough.
I hope you enjoy your time together!
There were 2,200 people on the Titanic, but the 20 lifeboats could only carry at most half of them. That means the other half will have no life. Out of humanitarianism, girls and children take priority in lifeboats, but men also want to live. They are unwilling to accept this unfair arrangement, and their rebellion is seriously high. The chief mate who maintained order had no choice but to fire a gun to suppress him, but shot and killed a person by accident. The murder was not Defoe's original intention, so he had to raise his gun to atone for his crime. The tragedies are staged one after another. Everyone is full of despair. Some welcome death with a gentleman's attitude, some weave fairy tales for their children, some just want to sleep peacefully, and some play the violin to compose the last movement for life. The owner of the cruise ship secretly jumped into the lifeboat and decided to live forever, while the captain refused to use the life jacket and wanted to live and die with his beloved ship. Similarly, the designer blames himself for the weak boat he built, and is willing to accept the trial of death. The bow part of the ship is about to sink. Jack climbed to the stern with Ruth. This is the place where they first met, and it will also be the final destination of their dream journey. The priest is still pulling the audience to pray together. Maybe this is their last comfort. The cunning Carl picked up a little girl, pretending to be her only relative, and successfully boarded the lifeboat. Slowly, the stern of the ship was raised high, and the living people rolled into the sea like dumplings. In the end, the hub couldn't support the heavy weight of the Titanic, and it tore in the middle, splitting in two. The stern of the boat fell heavily, hitting many people floating on the water. Knowing that the stern would be up again soon, Jack let Ruth flip over the railing. Sure enough, the stern of the boat was raised quickly, and many people had no time to climb up and fell straight down. The stern of the boat was about to be swallowed by the sea. Jack told Ruth to take a deep breath, because when entering the water, they will be attracted by a strong eddy current. The two were separated underwater by Larry, who pushed the current. There were countless human heads struggling on the sea surface. The scene was so tragic that it was heartbreaking. As soon as Rose came to the surface, a man pressed her repeatedly as a floating object, but Jack swam over in time. They swam desperately to find a floating plank. Unable to bear the weight of the two, Jack helped Ruth climb up, while he guarded his lover in the water. Jack knows he can't survive, but he wants to leave hope to Ruth. He asked Ruth to promise that he must live a good life, no matter how slim the hope, never give up. In order to maintain consciousness, Ruth looked up at the starry sky in a trance, muttering to herself all the time. Finally a lifeboat returned. The rescue crew shouted repeatedly, but there was only dead silence. When Ruth saw the light, hope was ignited, but the lover she held in her hand was already stiff, and her grief almost made her lose all fighting spirit. But she remembered her promise to Jack, and she called for help without any strength herself. So she reluctantly put Jack into the water, let him sleep here forever, and then swam to the nearby corpse with all her strength and got the whistle.
Come about!
Ruth was rescued. 1,500 people fell into the water, only 6 people became survivors. Later, everyone was rescued by another cruise ship. Carl looked for Ruth in the crowd, but Ruth deliberately avoided him, and they never saw each other for the rest of their lives. The Statue of Liberty stands before her eyes, but her Jack has never had a chance to see her. This is when the crew came to register their names.
Dawson. Rose Dawson.
She changed her surname to Jack's. She wants to live with Jack's instructions. People haven't stopped salvaging the Titanic for years. It wasn't until 84 years later that a professional team found it at the bottom of the sea. The glorious luxury cruise ship in those days has been eroded beyond recognition by sea water. They found Ruth's portrait in the safe that had been dusty for many years. Ruth in front of the TV is already 101 years old. When she saw the sketch created by Jack for herself, the elderly Ruth burst into tears. She hurried to that sea area. This was her wish that she had been waiting for all her life, and it was also the last concern in her life. Years have destroyed her face, but she can't destroy her longing for Jack. She boarded the railing again, and the scenes of the past reappeared in her mind. She slowly took out the heart of the ocean that the salvage team had been looking for. That's what Carl took when he gave her the coat by mistake. Now she throws it into the sea, let it meet her lover in her place. Her whole life is fulfilling her promise to Jack. She has been to many places and done many wonderful things, and now her wish is fulfilled.